Hi friends, welcome to my channel Series Scribe. In today's video, I am so excited to share with you all a sewing project that I worked on recently. I had stitched this patchwork sewing machine cover using leftover fabrics I had lying around. So instead of throwing those old fabrics, I decided to give them a second life. I hope this inspires you to get creative with your old fabric pieces and make something out of it too. So to start with, I stitched a big patchwork fabric by combining smaller pieces of leftover fabrics together. It is a fun way to use up all those tiny fabric scraps and create something useful. I'll share the exact measurements of the fabric with you a bit later in the video, but right now I want to walk you through how to stitch two fabric pieces together to start building our patchwork. First, start by placing two fabric pieces right sides together, making sure the edges align. You want to make sure both pieces are even, so take a moment to adjust them if needed. As you can see in the video, I have attached two fabric pieces together using a simple straight stitch. Likewise, I continued attaching all the small fabric pieces together to create this large patchwork fabric. This patchwork fabric will further use to be the base for stitching the sewing machine cover. Now that we have our patchwork fabric ready, it's time to move on to the next step. I'll go ahead and measure my sewing machine to get the correct dimensions like length, height and width. Once I have these measurements, I'll cut the fabric accordingly to ensure it fits perfectly to my sewing machine. So I have a brother sewing machine. The model is LS2125 and its dimensions are approximately 13 inches in height, 8 inches in width and 17 inches in length. As you can see in the video, I have cut the patchwork fabric according to the measurements I took earlier. I have two main pieces for the front and back of the sewing machine cover, which are the largest pieces. Then I have cut two side pieces for the left and right sides of the cover. Finally, I have also cut one top piece, which will be stitched as the top of the sewing cover. Each piece is carefully measured to make sure everything lines up perfectly when I stitch them all together. Now that our main fabric pieces are ready, I am going to set them aside for a moment and focus on the lining fabric. We need to cut the lining fabric to the exact same measurements as the main fabric pieces. This means we will cut the lining for the two pieces of the front and back side, two side pieces and one top piece to match the dimensions of the main fabric. Here I am simply using the main fabric cuttings as the reference to cut the lining fabrics. For the handle, I took a 10-inch rectangular piece of fabric. I folded it inwards to cover the raw edges and stitched along both sides to secure it nicely. Once I have my handle ready, I will place it on the top fabric, aligning it to the center and secure it with a pin. Now I will take it to the sewing machine and stitch on either ends of the handle. So it's time to stitch our main fabric. Let's see how to do it step by step. Start by taking the left side piece and placing it on the middle piece with the right sides of the fabric facing each other. Make sure the edges are aligned, then sew along the edge to attach the left side piece to the middle fabric. Similarly, take the right side piece and place it on the middle piece and make sure to face right sides together. now finished attaching both the left and right side pieces to the center fabric. Now take the other middle fabric piece. Let's call it the back side of the cover to make it easier for the reference. This piece needs to be attached to one side of the fabric you have already stitched. As shown in the video, align the edges of the back fabric with one edge of the previously stitched fabric, right sides together, and sew along the edges to attach them. Once the first side is attached, take the other raw edge of the fabric and align it with the opposite side of the main fabric and sew them together along the edge. Make sure to leave at least quarter inch of seam allowance. As you can see, I have a very small sewing corner at home where I work on all my projects. The sewing table I currently use is quite wobbly, so I have decided to order a computer table as a replacement and I'm waiting for it to arrive. So here I have finished stitching the sides to the center fabric and now I am checking to make sure the measurements are perfect for my sewing machine. Now once everything is sewed, this will create a tube-like shape forming the basic structure of the sewing machine cover. Now that I stitched the main fabric with the sides, let's move on to the next part of the process, which is attaching the top fabric to this main fabric. Now I am going to reverse the main fabric so that the back side is facing out. After that, I'll take the top fabric piece and align it with the top edge of the main fabric. To make sure everything stays in place while I sew, I'll secure the two pieces together using fabric pins, pinning them along the edges. This step will ensure that the fabric doesn't shift or move around when we stitch it together. Now I'll take this to the sewing machine and stitch on all the edges. As I stitch, I'll make sure to leave a half-inch seam allowance. Now I am done with securing the top fabric to the main fabric piece. Let's reverse it and see the outcome. Now the base structure of the cover is completely done. If you are okay to using it without lining, there is just one simple step left. All you need to do is fold the bottom fabric inwards to conceal the raw edges and that's it, you're all set to use it. However, since I am adding a lining fabric to my sewing machine cover for a cleaner finish, so please continue watching if you want to learn how to add the lining fabric to your sewing machine cover. Now I will move on to working with the lining fabric. The sewing process for the lining fabric is exactly the same as with the main fabric. I'll start by attaching the side pieces to the front and back fabrics just like we did before, and then I'll add the top fabric piece as well. One key thing to keep in mind while sewing the lining fabric is to leave a 3 to 4 inch gap at the top fabric side. This gap is really important because during the next step we will need to turn the main fabric right side out. So make sure you leave that gap before you finish stitching the lining. Here I have already worked through the sewing of the lining. Now let's insert the main fabric into the lining piece. At this point, the main fabric should be turned right side out and the lining fabric should be on the wrong side out. This is a very crucial step, so please take note of this point. Now carefully insert the main fabric into the lining fabric so that the right sides of both fabrics are facing each other. Once both the main fabric and lining fabrics are arranged neatly, carefully align the edges at the top and pin them together to secure everything in place. Once both fabrics are properly aligned and the seams match, we need to secure them with the pins. Next, I will take this to the sewing machine and sew all along the edge. Make sure to leave at least a ½ inch seam allowance. Be sure to stitch all the way around the fabric, ensuring everything stays in place. Finally, I am done sewing around the edges, attaching both the lining fabric and the main fabric together. Now it's time to reverse the fabric. Remember, we left a 3 to 4 inches opening in the lining fabric earlier. We will be using that opening to turn the fabric inside out. The sewing machine cover is almost complete with just a few final touches. We need to conceal the 4-inch opening in the lining fabric by doing a simple top stitch. The next step is to gently push the lining fabric inside the main fabric. Take your time with this step to make sure everything fits smoothly. Once the lining is inside, focus on aligning the seams perfectly. This will give the cover a clean and polished finish. Smooth out the edges carefully to remove any wrinkles or lumps, ensuring that both the main fabric and the lining sit nicely together. Once we have secured the fabrics with fabric pins and everything is aligned properly, it is time to do a top stitch. A top stitch is a simple stitch that we sew along the edges just on the outside to give our project a clean and finished look. It also helps to hold the lining and main fabrics together, ensuring they don't shift or move. One last thing to do before we are finished is, since the lining fabric can drop down when we hold the handle on top, we need to secure it in place now. In order to do this, I will simply add a top stitch along both handles, stitching through the lining fabric as well. This will keep the lining fabric fixed to the main fabric and prevent it from shifting or dropping. By doing this, we ensure everything stays neatly in place and the handle remains sturdy when we lift the cover. Finally, we just made our patchwork sewing machine cover. Now my sewing machine is dust free and our planet is fashion waste free. I hope you liked this sewing project to upcycle old clothes and give it a new life. If you did, please help me like this video and share it among your family and friends. I will see you all in my next video. Until then, stay curious and keep learning.